Enzo Amore was one of the most naturally gifted talkers WWE had seen in years. His catchphrases were trending, crowds popped for him, his merch was flying off the shelves. On paper, he had all the ingredients for a long and successful career, but Enzo had a gift for sabotaging himself that was almost as impressive as his gift for promos. So how did someone with that much personality end up getting not only fired, but completely blacklisted from the WWE? What were the scandals and controversies that caused his downfall? Where is he today, and is there any chance of him getting back to his former glory? Let's get into it. Enzo signed with WWE in 2012 with zero professional wrestling experience. He'd been a DJ for the New York Jets and managed a Hooters. Wrestling wasn't even on his radar until a chance encounter at a gym led to a tryout, and somehow he got the call. He debuted in NXT in 2013, jobbed for a few weeks, and then got paired with Colin Cassidy, a 7-foot giant who needed someone to do the talking. That partnership turned out to be perfect. Enzo handled every promo, Cass handled the action, and together they became one of the most entertaining acts on NXT. The crowds were loud, the catchphrases were everywhere, and by 2016, WWE brought them up to the main roster. They weren't winning titles, but Enzo and Cass were consistently over with the crowd, and one of the hottest acts on Monday Night Raw. After their split, WWE had to figure out what to do with Enzo as a singles act, and they landed on moving him to 205 Live, the cruiserweight brand. Around this same time, his personal life started making headlines for the wrong reasons. Enzo had been dating Liv Morgan, who would later become a main roster star and multiple-time champion. The relationship wasn't widely publicized, but in September 2017, Liv posted a tweet that made it pretty clear things were over, and that they didn't end well. Morgan announced on Twitter that she was single, with a post hinting she had been cheated on. She never named Enzo directly, but fans connected the dots. Enzo's response, in typical Enzo fashion, was to rap about it. After his WWE departure, he released a track that was clearly aimed at Liv Morgan and their past relationship. The song included lines suggesting he brought her into wrestling and that it was only a matter of time before she moved on with someone else. The cheating rumors were embarrassing for Enzo, but they were minor compared to what was about to come in the following months. When Enzo moved to 205 Live in late 2017, something clicked. He turned heel, started calling himself the reason the cruiserweight division even existed, and his arrogant heel gimmick gained traction. In many ways, it was his real-life persona dialed up to 11. He won the Cruiserweight Championship by defeating Neville and immediately leaned into the character, claiming he made the show relevant. But backstage, the situation was getting worse by the week. Reports had come out that Enzo was bringing a series of questionable guests into the locker room, and those guests were taking photos and videos of other wrestlers. On top of that, he was loud, constantly in character, and treating the locker room like his personal stage. During the European tour, Enzo had a loud phone call on the bus in the presence of other wrestlers who were already fed up with his behavior. Roman Reigns, who was effectively the locker room leader at the time, confronted him and reportedly kicked him off the bus, forcing him to sort out his own transportation. Enzo later confirmed a physical altercation happened, though he disputed some of the specific details. The message from the locker room was clear: his behavior had crossed a line. But then came January 2018, and everything collapsed. A woman named Philomena Shahan publicly accused Enzo, claiming she had been assaulted by him in Phoenix, Arizona in October 2017. The accusation went viral on Twitter while Enzo was mid-rehearsal at a Raw event, completely blindsiding him. According to Enzo, producers started looking at him strangely before he even knew what was happening, and within hours he was in Vince McMahon's office being told to go home. WWE suspended him immediately, stating the company has zero tolerance for such matters. The following day, he was released from the company. He was the reigning cruiserweight champion at the time, and the title was vacated on the spot. The case was later closed due to a lack of evidence, and no charges were ever filed. Enzo has consistently denied the allegations, but by the time the investigation was dropped, none of it mattered anymore. The damage was done. WWE had moved on, the locker room was relieved, and Enzo was out of a job with nowhere obvious to go next. However, what Enzo did next started a chain of embarrassing events that completely ruined his career. After the firing, Enzo didn't stay quiet. Just months out of WWE, he decided to make himself impossible to ignore. In November 2018, Enzo showed up at Survivor Series at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, in a very bad disguise, sitting in the front row directly facing the hard camera. When people started recognizing him, he stood up on his chair and started reciting his old catchphrases in front of the live crowd. Security tackled him and removed him from the venue, and he was subsequently banned from future events at the Staples Center. His explanation afterward was that it was a calculated marketing move, that WWE wouldn't put him on camera, which would make fans at home curious. which would make the videos go viral, which would make him trend worldwide. He said he spent $2,500 on a ticket, broke no laws, and trended #1 in the world as a result. He wasn't entirely wrong about the trending part, but it also cemented the image of a guy desperately clinging to relevance any way he could. Then came the summer of 2019, and it got more embarrassing. At a Blink-182 concert, AEW star Joey Janela spotted Enzo in the crowd, and the two got into an altercation. The whole thing was captured on video and described by Janela himself as the worst fist fight ever. Both men went back and forth on Twitter for days afterward, with Enzo insisting he was the composed one and Janela admitting he was blackout drunk when it happened. Neither came out of it looking great. With no path back to a major wrestling company, Enzo threw himself into music. He rebranded as Real One, then Enzo without the E, and started releasing rap tracks. The problem was the music itself. It wasn't unlistenable, but it was the kind of thing that only made sense if you already knew who Enzo Amore was. And even then, it was a stretch. The most attention any of his songs got wasn't because of the music, it was because of the subject matter. He released a diss track aimed at his accuser. Then he put out that track about Liv Morgan. Neither did anything to rehabilitate his image or build him an actual fanbase outside of wrestling circles. He also tried to stay visible in wrestling. In April 2019, he and Big Cass reunited and crashed the Ring of Honor and New Japan G1 Supercard at Madison Square Garden, jumping the barricade and attacking wrestlers in a worked shoot. However, the whole angle didn't lead anywhere. The duo weren't booked for any shows afterward, and the whole thing was never mentioned again. For a couple of years, Enzo floated around the independent scene with nothing consistent. He was still drawing some curiosity from fans who remembered his WWE run, but he had no real home base and no clear direction. That changed in late 2021 when he signed with MLW and debuted under the name Real One. He took an unusually patient approach in the early months, not even picking up a microphone for the first several shows, instead stacking wins to rebuild some credibility. It was the smartest thing he'd done in years, and for a while, it seemed like it might actually work. He got into feuds with Jacob Fatu, Mance Warner, and others, and was featured regularly on their TV show. But by 2023, the same old patterns started showing up. Reports came out that Enzo had been declining most of the creative pitch to him and wasn't interested in working with several of the company's top talents. MLW had announced him as the #1 contender for their World Heavyweight Championship, but Enzo claimed the match had been advertised without his agreement. He also pushed back on a program that would have involved working against a talent who had recently beaten cancer, saying he wasn't willing to go in that direction on the microphone. On his way out, he was written off TV with a quick loss to Microman. Both sides told different stories about what happened, and the fallout was nasty. MLW said they cut him. Enzo said he was never under contract to begin with and had simply stopped agreeing to appearances. Either way, the result was the same. Another promotion, another exit, another round of headlines about how difficult he was to work with. By 2025 and into 2026, Enzo was working almost exclusively for a small independent promotion called Fourth Rope Wrestling. The crowds were modest. The venues were small. And yet, he still had a flair for making noise in the wrong ways. In February 2026, to promote an upcoming Fourth Rope show at Philadelphia's 2300 Arena, the building that wrestling fans still call the ECW Arena, Enzo posted a video online directed at Paul Heyman. He stood holding 2 of his old championship belts and launched into a rant tearing apart Heyman, ECW, and the Philadelphia fanbase, even throwing in a reference to Jeffrey Epstein mid-promo for good measure. The whole thing spread across wrestling social media quickly, mostly because of how unhinged it was. He dismissed ECW's entire legacy, said none of the championships earned their count, and went after the Philadelphia crowd in terms that were hard to defend. Heyman didn't respond publicly. He didn't need to. The contrast did the work on its own. One man was at the top of the industry involved in one of the biggest stories going into WrestleMania. The other was posting shock value videos to promote an indie show at a venue he couldn't sell out on his own. The Epstein line, dropped in the middle of a wrestling promo, wasn't edgy. It was just a weird attempt to generate attention through provocation, rather than anything with actual substance behind it. It told you everything about where Enzo's career was at that point. When the microphone was the only tool you ever really had, and even that starts generating the wrong kind of reaction, there aren't many moves left. Enzo Amore had a genuinely rare gift. His ability to work a microphone, build a crowd, and make a catchphrase stick was real. And in the right circumstances, it created magic. The problem was that the same personality that made him magnetic on camera made him nearly impossible to work with everywhere else. Every chance he got, he found a way to burn it. The locker room, the relationship, the allegations, the rap career, the Survivor Series stunt, MLW, the Epstein promo. He kept digging his own grave. He's currently performing for fourth rope wrestling in front of crowds that are a fraction of what he once commanded. Whether he'll ever find his way back to something bigger is unclear. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see Enzo return to the WWE someday. And if you want to see another wrestler who had everything and threw it away, check out one of these videos on your screen.